It's late May. Victoria Day weekend is in the books, so Griff and I are coming to you a day late because unlike Vladimir Guerrero Jr. 5 years ago, Griff wanted to be in the lineup on press row for the Victoria Day matinee against the Chicago White Sox yesterday. So we are coming to you on Tuesday, May the 21st. It's a gorgeous day here in Halifax, Nova Scotia. I think it's really warm where you are in Oakville, Ontario. Griff, good to see your face.
It is indeed. The temperature is terrific. We have the air conditioning on for the first time, and it's a meat locker down in my studio, but I should have worn a jacket. but yeah, here we go on episode 20, and the Blue Jays are in the stretch of 16 games where they need to excel, where they need to make up for the horrible baseball they played leading into this stretch. And we'll see how that goes. They beat up on the Charlie Montoyo bench coach-led White Sox on Victoria Day, and we'll go over that a little later. The Victoria Day memory that I got of Vlad, we'll go over that. But before we start into the Blue Jays stuff, there's a memory that you'd like to share.
Yeah. So, I mean, we're a little late to the tribute paying here because this is our first podcast recording since the legendary Darren Dutchyshen passed away. And of course, we all heard about that last week, and we had known that Dutch had been in a journey with cancer for a number of years, had returned to the airwaves, and then stepped away from the airwaves again in December. And very sadly, at the age of 57, passed away. I come at this maybe a little differently because I'm not going to sit here and lie, Griff, and say that I knew Dutch really, really well. But we were always friendly whenever we'd bump into each other in the hallways at TSN during my time there. And we were able to work together, or I should say more likely, I was able to work with him a couple of times in both the 2015 and 2016 American League Championship Series. And of course, the Jays played the Royals in 15, Cleveland in 16. And you heard James Duthie, Jennifer Hedger, and Rod Smith give that awesome tribute up on the stage there at TSN that's been all over social media. And they were the people at work, among the people at work closest to Dutch. Certainly on camera, they had all shared Sports Desk or Sports Center with him. And so their stories are far more vast in both quantity and quality. But I will say, because Dutch came to TSN in 1995, and I was in high school. I was in grade 10 or grade 11, depending on what part of the year it was in 1995. And Dutch was somebody who, as you know, had a bigger-than-life personality and had a bigger-than-life delivery. And I think that that's what makes him the legend that he is. And I don't care what the genre is, whether it's news, sports, politics, whatever. Darren Dutchyshen is one of the greatest broadcasters this country has ever produced. And you would be hard-pressed to name a greater Sports Desk, Sports Center anchor than Darren Dutchyshen. I think Rod Smith is right there too in my personal power rankings, but Dutch and Rod did it so differently, and maybe that's why they worked so well together when they were Rodsky and Dutch. But I'm on the field with Dutch the first time. So this is Kansas City, 2015. And I'm having a moment. And I remember having the presence within myself to actually stop myself and have a conversation with myself in my head. I'm not actually talking to myself out loud. That would have looked too weird. But I remember saying to myself, appreciate this moment, because you are about to share the camera with one of your broadcasting heroes. And Dutch was a guy in high school and post-secondary that I would imitate. And I imitate a lot of people. You remember from my time on the beat with the Blue Jays, I had a bunch of people that I would imitate. It was just part of my humor, part of a way to get through the day when life is busy and all of that stuff. But nobody sounded like Darren Dutchyshen. Nobody delivered copy the way that Darren Dutchyshen did. And so, of course, I would embellish and be way over the top, but it was always in tribute. It was never mocking him. It was always in tribute. So much so that for my 21st birthday in June of 2000, a few friends of mine in Ottawa, because it was in post-secondary at that point, sent away to TSN to have an 8x10 autographed headshot of Dutchy sent to me for my birthday. And, I was always over the top, Darren Dutchyshen. And I have that photo in a manila envelope somewhere in a box because I've moved like 5 or 6 times in the last 21 years. So I've never gotten rid of it. I would have to find it. But I remember being on the field in Kansas City and stopping and saying to myself, there are moments in your life, professionally, personally, whatever the case may be. In this case, it was professional, where you've got to stop and literally allow yourself to smell the roses. And I was able to say to Dutch, not over the top, because then it gets into flattery and all that gross stuff. But I have a better memory of Dutch's reaction than I actually do of saying this to him. But I did tell him off the air how much it meant to me to have been able to share camera time with him that day for the very first time. And Dutch, in his true fashion, extends his hand. That's awesome, pal. It's great to work with you, and blah, 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 blah. And, just the way that he made you feel like you'd known him your whole life, just the way he was so welcoming. He certainly was aware of his celebrity and his brand, and how good he was at what he did, but he was so purely authentic. Exactly what you saw on camera was who he was off camera. And that, if I could encapsulate it all, sense of humor, extroversion, and all the things that we know of Darren Dutchyshen, but if I could encapsulate, in my view, what made Dutch the best at what he did was his authenticity. He truly was that excited about his job day in and day out. And he could take, it's different now, right? The Golden State Warriors are a thing and have been for a decade, but back then the Golden State Warriors didn't matter. I'm talking in the early 2000s. Like, Darren Dutchyshen could take a Golden State Warriors Sacramento Kings game 56 in early February of an NBA season and make that highlight package a big, big deal. And so I just want to say and add my voice to rest in peace, Dutch. Thank you for giving me moments in 15 and 16 in my career where I could truly stop and say, I met one of my heroes, and it was one of the highlights of my career.
Just that's great. And just on my part, there was one time in the early 2000s, I think it was, after JP Ricciardi was hired, and TSN wanted to ramp up their coverage of Blue Jays. And so they needed a Blue Jays expert or analyst. And so I flew in from spring training, and I went into studio, and it was Dutch. It was Dutch sitting there, and he was going to be my co on this audition tape. And the audition tape went horribly. I didn't know what cameras to look at. I didn't know what to say because it wasn't a live game. It was sort of highlights. And Dutch, of course, was an expert on handling highlights and making them sound vibrant and real. And he just looked at me. He corrected me. He helped me. He would say, let's do that again. And of course, leaving studio, I knew I wasn't ever going to get that job because of the awkward time that I had in there. But the fact that Dutch helped me as much as he did, and since that time, of course, covering major events, I would see him there, and it was always like seeing an old friend, and I always appreciated that about Dutch, because I, like you, admired and revered his style on air and his ability to make things vibrant and real. And yeah, R.I.P. Dutch.
Yeah, and just his sense of humor, and you heard it from James Duthie, Jen Hedger, and Rod Smith, and you've heard it from others. I'm telling you, Griff, whether it was Kansas City in 15 or being on the field in Cleveland in 16, I can't even, I cannot tell you what we were discussing off air. It's just not. It's just not, but it was not offensive or hurtful to anybody. I want to be clear about that. That was Dutch, right? And so I'm just grateful that I even got to spend a little bit of time, not only on camera with him, but near him, around him. And it will always be a highlight of my career in that industry. So a good man, gone too soon. And I just you and I talked about this off air, and when I tell this story, Griff, I'm hesitant to do it because it involves speculation on my part, so I want to be very clear about that. But when I heard Dutch had passed away, it was the morning when the news came out, and I was out, and our mutual good friend Arash Madani sent me the link. I was out in public at the time. I kind of had to sort of slip away, and it was hard. I didn't know Dutch that well, but he had an effect on everybody that even knew him a little bit. I think he had an effect on a lot of people who never met him, right? You felt like you knew him, just the way he delivered sports. But I go back, and again, this is speculation, but I go back to a day that I think would have been mid-month, last month in April. And I shared on this podcast that for a lot of the month of April, I was in the oncology ward at Sunnybrook Hospital, spending a lot of time with my dear friend Mina through to the end of a terminal cancer diagnosis. And one day I had gone down to the food court for lunch at Sunnybrook, and I rode the elevator back up and got back into the oncology ward. And I'm walking in the hallway toward Mina's room, and a booming voice in a room that I'm passing emanates, and I stopped. It sounded to me like Darren Dutchyshen. I don't know if it was, but let's be honest, Dutch had a unique voice. It stopped me enough that I actually stopped walking, planted my feet, leaned back to look into the room. Whosever voice it was blocked off by one of those dividing curtains because it was a shared hospital room. And so I thought nothing more of it, because I don't have cable TV, so I'm not really watching a lot of cable sports or what have you these days. I have the Sportsnet app to watch the Jays, but I wasn't really up to date on TSN. And so the last I knew was that Dutch had returned to the airwaves. I didn't know that he had left the airwaves again in December. So I went onward toward Mina's room and thought nothing more of it. I don't know if Dutch spent time at Sunnybrook. He could have been at Princess Margaret's. He could have been treated at home. I honestly don't know. But it hit me a couple of hours after he passed away. That memory didn't come to me the moment I heard that he died. It hit me a couple of hours after he passed away. Oh, crap. Did I actually walk by Dutch's hospital room in the oncology ward at Sunnybrook? Not many people sound like Dutch. I've never met anybody who does. So to me, it might have been. And that's extremely personal. There doesn't have to be any announcement from the family thanking Sunnybrook or wherever he was treated or any of the doctors. I'm not trying to pry, but it kind of haunts me because if it was Dutch, I wish that curtain had been pulled back, because if I'd seen his face, I would have gone in and said hi. And I know that he would have been himself and just been like, "Oh my God, Scott," you know. So that just kind of haunts me that maybe I walk past Dutchy's hospital room, kind of knowing it, but kind of not knowing.
Scotty, those are great stories, great memories, and great tribute to Dutch. Now we get into the story of the Blue Jays and where they stand. And let's start with the press conference that Ross Atkins had on Victoria Day weekend, Saturday. And let's talk about that. What were your impressions of that?
Well, I'm gonna reverse it, Griff, because I always appreciate these sorts of things coming from you, because you have both perspectives. You have a quarter century history as a media relations person for a big league ball team, whether that was the Expos for more than 20 years, the Blue Jays for 4 years, sandwiched in between, and now again running your own website. You have a quarter century of experience being a baseball columnist for a major publication. What is the aim? And I don't care which angle you take first, whether it's working as an arm of the team in media relations or whether it's as a reporter or a columnist. What is the aim, in your opinion, of a press availability like that, other than it's important to show face a few times a year when you're the general manager of a team?
Yeah, I think that's something that Ross Atkins and this front office doesn't really understand. And as you point out, it goes back, my experience goes back to mid-70s of the last century. That's a long time. But he's just, when he has an availability like that, it's not for anything specific other than the fact that there's 29 other teams where the general manager is available quite regularly and more spontaneously. And he doesn't need to be rehearsed on what questions might be asked. I mean, you look at Brian Cashman, the biggest media market in baseball, and when he's on a road trip, he's always on the field before a game, and he's always gets surrounded, especially at Yankee Stadium, by a group of reporters, and he's there for 10 minutes answering questions. And so when you're available like that every day or almost every day, you don't have to arrange these specific press release here. Ross Atkins will be available. When you're available more often, you don't have to do it as structured. And you look at Dave Dombrowski, and now with the Phillies, but he's been with winning organizations everywhere, starting with the Expos back in the late 80s. And he sits in the press box with the reporters, with the media during games. And you can approach him and ask him questions, and he will give you an answer. And there's not that air of secrecy of that something's going on that you don't know about, but we'll let you know once a month in a media availability. And as a lifetime reporter, you saw, if not the press conference itself, then summaries and clips. What was your impression of what came out of it? Because usually when there's nothing specific to be announced, the results are less than ideal. And especially the timing of that one, and most of the ones that Ross Atkins makes himself available for, that was on a holiday weekend, on a Saturday, when TV news crews are not available. They're not assigned on weekends unless there's something really, really special. And so the knowledge was there that it wouldn't be heavily covered by outside news sources who might ask difficult questions. It was apparently 10 Sportsnet media people and 3 other reporters, including MLB.com. So mission accomplished in that regard.
Yeah, I just want to add to your Dombrowski list and all that. best media meal in baseball, Target Field in Minnesota. And you remember Terry Ryan, the old general manager of the Twins? He used to sit at lunch, breakfast, if it was an early day game, early afternoon game, breakfast or lunch, he would sit at a table with the media. It was not on the record. He'd just shoot the shit with them every day. And, you know, I'm not saying Ross Atkins needs to become a dining buddy of the Blue Jays media contingent 7 days a week. I'm not implying that, but we're just giving examples of non-paranoid human beings doing non-paranoid things, right? You know, and everybody's got different personalities, introvert, extrovert. I want to be around people a lot. I don't. I want to get to know the media more. I don't like that. But that's the point is that there are different ways to handle this. And I don't know what it was, Griff. I was around back then. I don't know if this was the behavior in Cleveland, which had a much smaller media contingent. I don't know if they were scarred or burned or felt scarred or burned by the fallout from Alex Anthopoulos deciding to leave in October of 2015 and sort of the scorn that brought, and they just decided we can't trust anybody. I don't know what has propelled them into this state of mind. It could also be, and when I say this, sports is the most innocuous. It's not inconsequential, but it's the most innocuous example of some of the problems we have in the world today, where major corporations own far too many things, and so it constricts into one sort of tiny bubble. And the fact now that the Blue Jays essentially can control the media because they're not just in bed with the rights holder and the team are owned by the same entity. I don't understand the mentality. I don't understand the fear. I had conversations a couple of times on the phone with Ross Atkins on days before we do radio interviews on Sportsnet 590 The Fan, and he didn't say you can't ask this. There was never any you can't ask this, you can't ask that, blah, 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 blah. But I could tell in those conversations he was worried about what was coming. I was like, dude, we're just getting on the air and talking baseball for 15 minutes. Pretend we're on a couple of bar stools here. Tell me some stories. I'm going to ask you about the team. So-and-so's coming up. Vladdy and Bo are your young players. I mean, we're going back 4 or 5 years. But there was just like this, oh my God, what are you going to ask? Are you out to get me? I'm like, dude, I'm not going to live long enough for this to matter enough. I will come at you where I think I have to, but I'm really not out to destroy your life. If you can believe it.
I think that it starts with a small market in Cleveland and Mark Shapiro and Ross Atkins coming from there. I think the emergence of social media, and a social media that in this market, in this country, tends to be critical and more know-it-all, and this he's got to go, and they're very critical of management as opposed to players. And we know that they can get on players too, but social media is that, and mainstream media reflects what social media is saying. And so he's trying to keep that availability to a minimum. Like you said, he shouldn't have been suspect of your motives for wanting to chat for 15 minutes on a radio talk show that's going out to a huge number of sports fans that might actually choose to buy tickets for his product, but instead he thinks that you're out to get him. And to me, that is the beginning of the paranoia. But Alex Anthopoulos, for instance, he would show up on a road trip when the team had lost 6 of 9 or 7 of 10. He would show up on a road trip and we'd ask him, why'd you come here? Is there something going on? He said, no, I just don't want my manager to take all the heat. And that's a man's man as a GM talking. And so the difference between this group and the previous with Alex Anthopoulos is it's largely the same members of the media, only they're total opposite of what they had before. And now they're dealing with someone who wants to know what you're going to be asking 24 hours later in a situation where there's really no glaring problems or issues that he has to be defensive about. And it's something that's been consistent over the course of the now 9 years. And you think about that, we've talked about that before. This is the 9th year for Ross Atkins as the GM. Pat Gillick was 17, JP Ricciardi 8, Gordash 7, Anthopoulos 6. And Peter Bavesi, 1977, was 1 year. So it's not like Ross Atkins and Mark Shapiro have not been given the opportunity to succeed. And they've had 4 of the 5 largest payrolls in team history. And right now they have the 9th highest payroll and the 22nd best record. So that doesn't jibe. And so, maybe there's a reason for the Saturday paranoia on his press briefing where he talks about the strength of the Buffalo Bisons, even though the only 2 Bisons that have been up this year have a combined 1 for 26 in Brian Servin and Addison Barger. So, fans aren't dumb. They know that it doesn't translate necessarily from success at AAA to the major leagues, but he's talking about the success of the Buffalo Bisons, talking about the exit velocity that he sees on this major league team that leads him to be optimistic that things will turn around. I think what should lead to the optimism about things turning around is the current schedule. And we've talked about it for weeks, that they've had a difficult schedule and they can look ahead to especially this 16-game stretch they're on now and maybe turn it around and get back above 500. But getting back above 500 is going to be nice for that 16-game stretch, but it doesn't mean that the season has turned around.
Well, yeah, there are different ways to respond to the schedule comment, which is like, it's not like the Detroit Tigers are horrible. This isn't the Tigers of 2 years ago. The White Sox are dreadful. They're awful. Like, you need to sweep, though. You've put yourself in a position where you need to sweep the White Sox this week, and they're off to a good start, winning 9-3 in the first game. And we're talking on the afternoon of Tuesday, May 21st. Second game will go tonight. And then you'd like to sweep them, obviously, again in Chicago next week. But this idea that, wow, I'll just manhandle the Tigers because the Tigers aren't that great. I got news. The Jays aren't that great. Now, they may be starting to warm up. Bo Bichette had 4 hits on Victoria Day. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is tearing the cover off the ball. And if Ross Atkins wants to go on and on about exit velocity on a holiday Saturday afternoon press conference, the first time he showed his face since the opening series, if you want to make it all about exit velocity, then I think what you are saying in the next breath is it's time for George Springer to retire. Because the bat speed is gone and the exit velocity is in the lower rankings of major league hitters. So we play both sides of the coin on that one. Look, Griff, to get back to what you originally asked, I think it's important for executives to show their faces, but I had no expectations that anything of substance was going to come out of Ross Atkins's mouth. And so I'm not going to hold it against him that nothing of substance came out of his mouth. I'm just going to repeat what I've said. It's my feeling and my opinion. I'm tired of all of this. I'm tired of it. And look, they may win 70 of their remaining 120 games, which, by the way, would get them to the 89 wins they had last year. So keep that in mind, math hounds. They've got to play at a win percentage pace that I believe fewer than a half dozen teams played to the entirety of last season. just to get back to the 89 wins that got them the third wild card spot last year. Okay.
Yeah. I'm not into that sort of,
No, I understand, but it is true. But you
because
have to,
if you put together a good streak, a good stretch, then
it gets
changes
better.
the whole numbers.
Right, but it's still true on the whole, and I just am not in the crowd of, well, they've got an easy schedule, because I think the Detroit Tigers are a team that could split a series with them, that could take 3 out of 4 from them. The Pittsburgh Pirates could throw Paul Skeens at them, and if he's got the breaking pitch offsetting the 104-mile-an-hour fastball that night, he's going to strike out 19 of them, and the Pirates are going to shove it right up there, what. And then that's one of the 3 games that they don't win against Pittsburgh. So this idea that it's just going to all be smooth and lead them into a June where they get a lot of Boston and Baltimore at home, and then we're really going to find out. Look, I mean, we know what we like about this team. And Alek Manoah is making us like the rotation even more after his 2 most recent starts. And we know what the concerns are with this team, which remains its batting order. Not its batting order, its lineup in general. We can get into the order. But the lineup I don't think is a good enough offensive lineup regardless.
Yeah, but
I had this team winning 84 or 85 games. I'm on pace to be incorrect. But people who call me a nasty or a hater or a pessimist, I'm looking like an optimist.
Scotty, at least with the lineup, they addressed the batting order, and it seems like that is going to be for a while. Where, I mean, we weren't the only ones suggesting strongly that George Springer needed to be dropped from leadoff spot, and he's now hitting 6th. And there have been changes around him since he was moved out of the leadoff spot, but he's stayed in that 6th hole, which we suggested and which I agree is probably ideal if you're going to play him every day. And his defense in right field is still above average. So you put him in that 6th hole, and to suggest that you're hiding a guy in the 6th hole, which it becomes an RBI spot, he's responded with a couple of runs batted in that spot. I'm not sure Davis Schneider is an ideal leadoff hitter, which he has been filling that role. And really, Davis Schneider would be a bench player if the rest of the team since opening day had been performing. If Bo and Vlad had been performing, Justin Turner has tailed off tremendously. I don't know. We can discuss what you do with him. Kirk has been not good, even with his 2 hits or whatever he had the other day. But that is a lineup that needs a lot of work or improvement internally. But the batting order at least has been addressed. And Danny Jansen hit 2nd in game 1 of the White Sox series. And Russ Martin did it as a catcher for the Jays and did very well in that spot. So maybe Danny Jansen will respond. He's going into a free agent off season. And he seemed to, after the game on Monday, seemed to be thriving and really happy about his performance and about the way that he's being used. So maybe he'll even get some DH time, which when he's not catching, he'll be a DH because he's more of a threat right now than Justin Turner.
Yeah, and go with what works. And I saw some people being pissy yesterday that Vogelbach wasn't in the lineup after his 3-hit day on Sunday, and I'm just trying to imagine a triple for the cycle off the bat of Daniel Vogelbach. That would have been humorous to watch if he'd had that opportunity to try and leg out a triple and hit for the cycle. But we talked about that. Who are we talking about in the Houston series? Davis Schneider hit the home run off of, I think it was Josh Hader, right, to turn a 1-0 deficit into a 2-1 9th inning lead, and then they won that game 2-1, and then Schneider wasn't in the lineup the next day, and it's like, they've got their reasons for this. I'm not saying you can't quibble with it optically, but they're into swing paths and the way pitchers tunnel and they're trying to put 9 guys out there whose barrels are going to run into the baseball as it crosses home plate. And it's not like Vogelbach for the first 6 weeks was doing anything. He had a big day Sunday. He wasn't in the lineup Monday, and it didn't matter because they won 9-3. I mean, he'll be back in the lineup when it suits. I just, to me, Griff, and tie it all together here back to Saturday's availability with Ross Atkins. I'm tired of hearing, and Scott, where are you hearing this? Well, as I said, I've kind of drawn down from social media, but I see it in fan groups and stuff. People are like crapping on Don Mattingly. Like, this is not about Don Mattingly. It's a personnel issue. Back to your point, and Brian Burke always used to grouse about it. It was like, it's always management who's getting blamed in this city and not the players. And I would always think to myself, one, when you came here, you wanted the media attention until things didn't go well. And then the media attention turned negative. And then all of a sudden you didn't like it. And number two, yeah, it is about the players. Who puts the players on the ice or on the field? Who builds the team? Right. And so we identified through the winter and spring training the roster challenges that we felt this team had. And those are generally to do with the offense, and those have been reflected so far. Now, Bo and Vladdy are starting to turn up the heat a little bit, and suddenly this thing looks different. Here's the thing. They're the star players. They have to be consistently good all year long, but it doesn't mean that they're going to be red hot all year long. So can you fill in the blanks in the periods of time when Bo and Vladdy aren't going? And the answer to that so far, because we have a pretty good sample of it, the first 6 weeks of the season when they weren't going, the answer is no. They don't have it.
Correct.
They don't.
I asked the manager 2 questions. We were talking about Vogelbach. I said, with Vogelbach on second and Kirk hitting, what were you looking for? And he went, a home run. I went, yeah, that's about right. I said, if there was a match race, you, Vogelbach, and Kirk for 40 meters, who would you take? I said, who would Ipe take? And he thought about it, and he said, Kirk, Vogelbach, and me. Only because I haven't had the reps lately, but otherwise, I think he thought he could take Vogelbach.
Vogelbach.
Vogelbach what?
Well, Vogelbach and Kirk are the only 2 players in baseball who it takes 3 singles to score them from second base.
Although that was you know who's underrated as a base runner, and I would love watching Vlad go from first to home on a double.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, once he gets going, if you're the third base coach, you better think twice about stopping him as he comes around third, because with that momentum that he's built, and his helmet usually comes off somewhere between second and third, it's impossible to stop him. You just keep waving him. That's all. But
Kenny Williams, John McLaren, 1989.
Yeah, right. That's
Kenny
the famous video.
Yeah.
But it was an anniversary, and we sort of briefly mentioned it, Victoria Day, and I got the story of 2019 Victoria Day. Vlad's not in the lineup, and I looked at it. There was 23,000 celebratory Victoria Day fans, and the commotion and the brouhaha and the criticism of Charlie Montoyo and the Blue Jays, and it was fans' introduction to the baseball version of load management, where the load, which was Vlad Guerrero Jr., was being given a day off. He had played the entire road trip, San Francisco, then flying to Chicago. I think they played the White Sox 4 games.
Yep.
So it was a week on the road, and then flying back Sunday night. And it was scheduled as an off day for Vlad, because there was no understanding from the Cleveland guys or from Charlie, who was in his first year as a manager after, as you point out, 30 years in the minors. There was no understanding of what Victoria Day meant. And to me, there was no understanding of what Victoria Day meant, because I had been in baseball my whole life. I had been in Montreal, where Saint Jean Baptiste far is more important than Victoria Day. And so, like, I said something. I said, Charlie, are you sure? I stuck my head in his office before the game, said, Charlie, are you sure you don't want to play Vlad? It's a holiday. And he went, no, it's his day off. And I went, okay. And I suppose if I had understood the real importance to those fans of seeing Vlad Guerrero for 4 at-bats playing third base, that I might have been more insistent. But what do I know?
Well, yeah. I mean, the context of that period of time is that Vladdy had been up for what, about a month, maybe a little less.
A little less than that, because I think it was late April.
It was late April, right? So he'd just come up. The team was absolute dog shit, right? You lost 95 games that year. Everybody knew it was.
Bo wasn't up yet.
Bo wasn't up. Had been torn to the studs. So I think the idea, and we're delving into something that is 5 years old, number one, and number two ultimately doesn't really matter in the large scheme of things. But the idea would be that it's a Monday afternoon, Victoria Day game. That would be a game, theoretically, where you as a family might take the kids out to the ball game, where you wouldn't do it on a Wednesday night because it's a school night and whatever. That might be one of the days. Who cares? It's nobody's, and we call it 2-4. No. It's not like we're all getting on our hands and knees and, like, bowing down to Queen Victoria, who died 123 years ago. Like, it just happens to be the name of the holiday Monday. I think it was more that, hey, this is an opportunity for families who ordinarily might not get to the ballpark. They got to take the GO train in, or they drive in from a suburb, whatever. That might have been a game. Maybe Tuesday night was the night to sit Vladdy, when there's 10,000 people watching a 95-loss team get drubbed, as opposed to the Monday holiday.
I mean, I totally agree but for a rookie manager in his 35th game, let's say,
he wouldn't know. Yeah,
to make that decision when he was being told by the analytics and the front office that this was his day off, the medical staff, they would say, because Vlad had gone on the road not having hit a home run, and he came up as this savior. And in San Francisco, he hit 2. So mission accomplished there. Went to Chicago, played every day there. And the worst thing was that I think around the 3rd inning, the American League announced that the AL Player of the Week was Vlad Guerrero Jr. And so we announced it in the press box just in the middle of all of the controversy of why is he not in the lineup. And that created even bigger problems. So coincidentally, Charlie Montoyo, White Sox bench coach, I had a chance to go into the Sox clubhouse, and we had a good discussion about that and many other things of his tenure and my tenure, which actually overlap with the Blue Jays. He was 2019 to 22. 1920,
July of 22.
Yeah. And so at the end of that season, that was the end of my tenure. So we had a lot to talk about, but it was fun. I mean, it's
Griff.
It's a big part of the myth of the Blue Jays over that time, and the myth of Charlie Montoyo, and the mythology surrounding Vlad Guerrero Jr. I mean, but nobody really says, people do say something when an NBA team comes in and their superstar is sitting because of load management and stuff. So, I mean, it's 162 game schedule. Only Cal Ripken plays every day. But like you said, it could have been Tuesday.
His soul, Charlie's, must be dying right now, being on the bench of that White Sox team. You want to talk? We sit here and say that the Blue Jays window may have closed before it ever truly opened. You want to talk about a team that actually went through a significant rebuild that looked for a little while like it was working, And then poof, the White Sox are horrible again. He just must be dying over there. There's no hope. There's no hope in Chicago. There's no way that coaching staff sees its way through to the end of whatever is happening there.
Although you would think that they would have replaced them after last season, because they didn't really do anything in the offseason to, they traded away Dylan Cease. They got rid of some veteran players. They
signed
their
Paul
shortstop.
DeYoung. They signed Paul DeYoung.
And what a day he had. A return to the stomping grounds. I asked the Blue Jays if there was a video tribute going up on the board at any point. He was 3 for 44 in his time with the Blue Jays. He was 3 for 4 on Monday, on Victoria Day, with a home run. He never hit a home run in 44 at-bats with the Jays. And he had 1 RBI, and he had 3 on Monday. It's crazy.
A great revenge. That's a very White Sox-esque for this era revenge game where you have a big day for your team and you lose by 6.
And you lose, right?
Like,
but there was one other anniversary you wanted to talk about. I think it was the anniversary of Seinfeld and the Yankees and George Costanza getting his job.
I will do the opposite. Instead of ordering the salmon, I will order the chicken salad and cheers. Actually, it's the tuna that's the opposite of the salmon. Is one of them swims downstream, one of them swims up, and George is good for the tuna. But I was looking this up because I was on Netflix a few nights ago, just chilling out, and I threw a couple of Seinfeld episodes on. And you're scrolling through the episodes and the seasons on Netflix, and I remembered, I said, so season 9 was the last season. So that was 1997 into 1998. And the opposite episode was the season finale of the 1993-1994 Seinfeld season. So I went on Wikipedia and I typed in the opposite Seinfeld episode. And sure enough, the date it aired on NBC was the season finale, May 19th, 1994. So Sunday was the 30th anniversary of George Costanza being hired as the assistant to the traveling secretary of the New York Yankees.
And he did it by being opposite. Didn't he insult Steinbrenner or something terrible in that episode?
Yeah, he got right in his grill and blah, 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 all for the glorification of your massive ego. Hire this man.
Let's talk about pitching, and you can't talk about the bullpen without talking about the resurgence of the rotation. And you've got Alek Manoah completing a 5-man rotation that now, and this was the plan coming out of spring training in 2023, was to have a 5-man rotation that could give you, and it looked very similar at the time, that could give you 6-7 innings per start. And that would give you consistency. You didn't have to save your bullpen arms just in case your 5th starter, or even if it was a bullpen day, or save your arms because you're worried that one of your starters would only be able to go 2 or 3 innings. And now Alek Manoah in his last 2 starts, and we talked about how there was optimism, even with the numbers that were showing in the minor leagues and in his first start, in Manoah's first start back in the majors, that there was optimism because of what looked like body language surrounding the execution of his pitches. What did you see? Just because we had talked optimistically, especially from my side about it, because I've known him since he was a rookie and I've dealt with him on a daily basis, and I saw the spiral of his attitude and his performance. But from the outside, what did you see between start 1, 2, and 3?
So you and I talked about this off the air, and I liked how you generalized it in our conversation off the air about his body language. Because to me, some of the more obvious signs on the mound, and this is for Pete Walker to discuss, or somebody who understands pitching far better than me, because it was all about, with Alek, repeating your delivery, repeating your follow through, etc. Same landing spot. You want to be consistent that way. I can sit here and say that it looks to me like the slider is, if it's not all the way back, is most of the way back. He's clearly mixing in a changeup against left-handed hitters, which is a pitch that will, sort of fade. It's obviously off speed. So it's a great comp for your fastball. You play your changeup off your fastball, but it also will fade against the opposite-handed hitter. You're a right-handed pitcher, it'll fade from a left-handed hitter. You're a left-handed pitcher, it'll fade from a right-handed hitter. So all of that stuff kind of looks good to my layperson's eye. What's most encouraging for me, Griff, and I don't know if it's the combination of a little bit of weight loss, so he looks more in shape, combined with the cornrows coming out of the back of his hat. He looks like a badass again. He looks like a badass. And it's not like this fake sort of I'm showing you that I'm a badass, but deep down I'm insecure and broken down and I'm going to dump all over myself. He looks like a badass who believes that he can pitch like a badass, and it's only been 2 starts. You can argue that the third one, the first of the 3, was better than the line because it kind of fell apart for him in the 4th inning of that first one. But certainly the last 2 starts, and maybe all 3 if you want to go there, he not only looks like a badass and looks like somebody who believes he's a badass again, his results are badass. And so I would love him to turn into Alek Manoah and put a bat in his hands and get 3 hits and a couple of home runs in a game on top of being able to pitch, because this team could use that. But since it's not going to happen, and to be fair to Alek, and of course I'm only kidding, if he's back, and as we discussed, Griff, in the winter, he doesn't have to be 100% back, because 2022 could turn out to be the greatest year of his career. But if he is 80% of the 2022 guy, he's going to have a 15-year career in Major League Baseball that's pretty damn good, and he's going to make a lot of money. So it's got to breathe. He's got to go out and do it again, and then do it again after that, and then he's going to have a rough outing, and then he's got to bounce back from that rough outing, and people can't give up on him the first time there's a rough outing. It's got to play out over a handful of months, and we'll see how he deals with the adversity and everything that comes. But he's looking like somebody who we can talk about again being a consequential piece of this starting rotation.
Yeah, I mean, to the point of him believing that he's a badass, believing that he is back and that he has the swagger. What impresses me is that he doesn't need to look anymore to the opposing dugout and say, tell him to cross that Audi sign like Garrett Cole did with Garrett Cole, because that's false bravado. That's bullshit, but he all of his energy is directed towards the hitter, towards his catcher, and towards his own dugout. So the swagger is there, but it's pointed in the right direction. And that clearly has to do with the cornrows. but
the cornrows didn't work for Colby Rasmus.
That's true. But the another guy in that rotation, Jose Barrios, nobody really asked him. He came up with this yesterday after his start, on Monday after his start. He talked about leadership, because John Schneider said he's becoming a leader. He's become a leader in that rotation, in that pitching staff. He said it happened. Barrios said it happened after the Minnesota series or the Minnesota postseason when he was pulled. He said he went to them and said that and he expressed himself, his dismay, his anger, his need to be the guy. And it was almost cathartic for him. And now he's taken that into this season. And he had a really good season in 2023. But if he can become that leader among that group in 2024, because Gausman is sort of leveled off, and I don't think he's going to have as good a season as at his peak with the Jays. Bassett is just a mess of internal thought processes and how do I beat the pitch clock and how do I beat the hitter? How do I make him sweat and then lift my leg with 1 second left so that he's all discombobulated?
I just watch him, Griff.
Bassett. That's Bassett right there.
I watch Bassett and I just feel like he's hitting the buttons and then just beep, 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 beep. It's like,
And he doesn't hide those emotions either. It's like you can see where he is at any given point. And I think that may have been a problem with Manoah because Manoah is also an emotional guy. And in 2020, when the pitch clock and all the new rules came in, this disengagement from the rubber, he looked to Bassett, another emotional mess, as his inspiration. And I think it took him a full year to come to grips with how I don't need to be a reflection of the new rules. I can be me just with better pacing, like, because Manoah used to step off the rubber, take the throw back and rub the baseball on the side of the mound while staring at the hitter, and it pissed hitters off.
Yeah.
And it also went well past 18 seconds. So he had to come to grips with how to manage that, and he didn't do a very good job of it before. So as long as Alek Manoah's health and arm and shoulder and legs and hamstring, as long as everything is in good shape, I think he can have like a really bounce back, maybe a comeback of the year candidate, if he just keeps it up. And I really like the kid. I know he's 26 years old, but we're all still kids. So who are we kidding, But this rotation, and I asked again the manager, if you get 6 innings per start from your rotation over 7 days, that leaves 21 innings to take care of with 8 relievers. 21 innings, 8 relievers. How is that difficult? And he said, well, I should be able to do that. But we talked about it. What do you think? What do you think they need to do, Scotty, with managing that bullpen now that they know how good Jimmy Garcia is?
To me, you could make the argument Jimmy Garcia should be the closer on this team, but really you're just reshuffling the deck chairs, because I quite like the way they're using Jimmy right now, which is 2, 3, and 4 due in the 7th? Then it's Jimmy time. Is 2, 3, and 4 due in the 8th? It's Jimmy time. I think it'll be a real test if 7, 8, 9 is due in the 8th, and 1, 2, 3, or 2, 3, 4, if somebody reaches base, is due in the 9th, and you go Romano 8th, Jimmy 9th. But I like the idea because Garcia, clearly Jimmy Garcia is not bothered by when it is that he pitches, because he's going and destroying everybody all the time. So I like the fact that he kind of floats for them and pitches in the highest leverage situations late in ball games. And you could make him your 9th inning guy, but if you did that, then you're looking at Jordan Romano as sort of your floater, because you can't count on Swanson yet, and you may not be able to all season long. Chad Green has been injured for the last few weeks, so he's going to have to reacclimate, and outside of that, there's not a lot you can trust, right? Nate Pearson showed you the other night that he's absolutely not the guy. And I was thinking about Nate Pearson, Griff, in the context of what you were saying early last year about Alek Manoah going on MLB Network every Tuesday morning as their Tuesday correspondent. Too much too soon? Maybe the hype machine doing the will Nate Pearson throw 110 miles per hour dot before he'd ever established himself as a bloody major league pitcher kind of gave us a window into his headspace. I want to be a metrics humping cyborg instead of becoming a good pitcher. Because you know what he's not? He's not a good pitcher. His slider's flat or too flat and sits in the zone too much, and his 100-mile-an-hour fastball doesn't move. Ask Jimmy Garcia about movement. So you really only have Romano, to whatever extent you individually as a fan of this team want to trust him, he is a trustworthy reliever. But you really, at this point today, have Romano and Garcia. They need Green back, and he needs to get into that little triangle there and make it 3 that they really trust. And then you're kind of throwing up prayers with Meza and Bowden Francis when he gets back, and Zach Pop and whoever else. But to me, it's like John Schneider's not an idiot all the time. Like, let's be fair to John Schneider. Relievers can make managers look really dumb when they're not good. And too many of the Blue Jays relievers have been either inconsistent or not good this year.
Well, I like your comment about John Schneider. I'm sure he'll appreciate the fact that you don't think he's an idiot all the time.
No, and it's a play on words. I want to come to the defense of John Schneider. Every time he puts a reliever in and it goes wrong, it's not because he's dumb.
Right.
Because the guy pitching like crap.
There's a game plan, and Pete Walker is a brilliant pitching coach. John Schneider, they sit together and they come up with a plan through matchups of late innings, through 3-person segments of the opposing batting order. And where do you want to put Tim Meza in? And if you got 2 out of 3 left-handers, that's where you want to put him in. Because if you see 2 guys that they're not going to pinch hit for, you definitely want him in there for that stretch. But they're humans. The coaching staff is dealing with humans. And for instance, you could have this game plan that could, if one guy messes up, the whole game plan goes down to shitter. And for instance, yesterday, I'm sure that Jimmy Garcia was warming up in the 8th inning to pitch to the top of, or in the 7th inning to pitch to the top of the order in the 8th. That was the plan. Only Barrios gave up a home run, walked the guy, and got all discombobulated with the home plate umpire, with the CB Buckner, and was totally out of sorts and was at 100 pitches. So the plan was Jimmy Garcia, the top of the order in the 8th, Romano in the 9th. Instead, he has to bring in Jimmy Garcia to face the bottom of the order in the 8th, because it's clear that Barrios is done, even though that wasn't the plan. So the plan, the best laid plans, and in baseball and in sports, when you're dealing with humans, it can happen. And the pitching chain is as weak as its weakest link. And in this Blue Jays so far, there have been a lot of weak links. But I believe that when Chad Green comes back, and when Bowden Francis is there to, we talk about starting pitchers expected to go 6 or that can go 6. If a guy goes 4, then Bowden Francis is there to pick up the 6 outs to get them to 6 and to get them to the crux of the bullpen. And to me, 21 innings per week for the bullpen. That's what we're looking at. If a team is going to the postseason, if a team is going to be really good, if his team is going to win in the 90s, there are 2 stretches of 10 games where you're going to need to be winning, or win 8 out of 10, win all 10, but you're going to need your same bullpen guys, your important bullpen guys, to pitch night after night. So having more than Jordan Romano who can close is a really good thing in those situations. Jordan Romano remains your closer, but if he's saved 2 games in a row, you have Jimmy Garcia or Chad Green that can go in. Even if the lineup's set up, you got Tim Meza who can go in, who's been pitching a little better. He's way ahead of Swanson on that chain right now. But I don't think of course it's not a problem having somebody like Jimmy Garcia, even if he's not your closer, even if he's showed that he can be someone's closer. If he's not your closer here, that means that that strength in the 8th and 9th is going to carry you through the season. So I don't think it's a problem, and I don't think you have to make that decision. As you said, Jordan Romano is good enough in that role, and Jimmy Garcia in key innings, top of the order when you have a lead, is brilliant.
Tuesday, May the 21st, Jays on a 2-game win streak. It's so good that we forgot that they actually lost the series to the Rays on the weekend because they won Sunday and then they beat the White Sox in the Victoria Day game. They got 2 more with Chicago at the Dome. Then it's 4 in Detroit, and Tariq Skubal, the Tigers left-hander, who is their best starting pitcher, barring rainouts, will miss the Jays series because he's scheduled to pitch for Detroit on Wednesday. So the Jays could play Thursday through Sunday at Comerica and not have to go up against the tough lefty Tariq Skubal, and then it's off to Chicago to play the White Sox. Griff and I we didn't actually talk about this off the air, which is great because I take notes and then I forget to refer to them. Do you want to make the announcement about our first live post game, or are we?
I think we need to sit on it.
We need to sit on it. Okay, so you might have plans this week. Okay, all right, we'll do that. I'm good with it.
Detroit series, we're talking somewhere Detroit series. Is that what the plan was?
That was the thought a week ago.
All right, well, we'll do it, and we'll make our schedule around that. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. So we will be getting to youtube.com/Exit Philosophy, where you can get Exit Philosophy podcast episodes on video. You can look at us while we talk, if that's your thing. We'll also do some live post-game shows after Blue Jays games. youtube.com/Exit Philosophy. Griff is hard at work at griffsthepitch.com. That's where you can get weekly MLB power rankings, multiple columns per week, chats with ex-Expos, ex and current Blue Jays, and episodes of the Exit Philosophy podcast. Griffsthepitch.com. Head on over there, enjoy the content, throw him a subscription. He would really appreciate it. I say he, as he's sitting right there listening, and I'm sure would confirm it. You, Griff, would appreciate it. And otherwise, we are on track to record again next Monday. We pushed it back a day for the holiday weekend this week. We'll come at you with the next episode in podcast form of Exit Philosophy next Monday.
Yeah, we will go on Memorial Day, whether we like it or not. But thanks, Scotty. Thanks for everyone for listening. But yeah, Memorial Day is one we don't celebrate as hearty as Victoria Day. So we'll do next Monday, and we'll be out there with episode 21.
Let's hope it goes well enough in Detroit that we're not having to memorialize the season.
Oh, nice. I see what you did there. But the Tigers series, the rotation is going to be so key because the Tigers bullpen is locked down from the 7th to the 9th. So the Jays better have a lead early, or otherwise this soft part of the schedule won't look so soft.
We'll leave it there and talk to you very soon on Exit Philosophy. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Scotty.